Welcome to Job Ready. I'm joined by a very special guest today, Oscar Freigedo. Welcome, Oscar.
Hello, Jeff. Thank you for having me here. It's a real pleasure.
It's my pleasure. And for our audience, Oscar is the founder of Savvy HR Consulting. Now, they're based in Latin America, and they specialize in employee experience, employer branding, and cultural transformation. Oscar is really interesting with his perspective because he brings a multinational vantage point to our total rewards conversation. He's had over 30 years of practice spanning total rewards, employee experience design, workforce strategy across both Latin America and Europe. He's among the early practitioners to apply human-centered design methodology to compensation and benefits, and he began that work in 2014 when the tools to operationalize it barely existed. So today, what I'm really excited about is we're going to discuss how you design an employee experience that actually serves people across employment types, across borders, and in the middle of an AI-driven disruption no one fully understands yet. So, Oscar, you have a unique perspective. I know that's a big conversation, and I aspire to big conversation, especially with you.
Well, thank you very much. I never realized I did all this stuff. Thank you. Thanks for reminding me. But well, you have a tough one for starting. It's quite complex when you think about single EVP or maybe a philosophy, a global philosophy for compensation, rewards, benefits, or whatever. Because you need to consider that maybe from headquarters, whatever your headquarters is located, you will have to implement all these ideas across the globe and across boundaries. And maybe you have different legislation, cultural background, market, economical activities, industrial activities. And it's quite easy to miss the point and make something so generic that is not relevant anywhere. So when you design an EVP, you need to get the context. You need to realize where it will be deployed. So from base in Argentina, in Buenos Aires, I work for Latin America, and it was very often that we receive a global policy that we have to deploy here and there. And all these context issues arise when you move forward in that direction. That's why you need to understand what is happening in the place where you deploy an EVP strategy or employee experience strategy, and well, of course, benefit compensation, total rewards as really important part of the EVP. Remember.
Well, Oscar, let me ask. I want to get into the deployment, the potential for a framework that is global. But where I'd like to start is, you have a unique perspective on total rewards in the conversations that I've had, and it's very strategic. And I know you shared that you see them as a culture signal and a design medium. Let's start there. Tell me more about that, how you approach total rewards in that way.
Well, my approach in total rewards is as a decision architecture. You need to understand not only what you are going to pay, but you have to can be able to explain your decisions. Nowadays, one of the most important trends on rewards is around transparency, and not the focus is not on the data, on what someone can be doing on its salary or benefits or whatever it is. The companies need to explain how they get that decisions. And the easy way for the last, 20, 25, 30 years is to say, well, this decision was market driven. Well, market could be a tricky concept when you're talking about decisions. So you need to understand your business first, what kind of experience you need to design to support the business. And as you know, the EVP is the north of every employee experience design. So compensation as part of the EVP should be first in line with the business, then in line with the expectations of the people who will be transiting the journey map. So that's my point. You need to understand first how you get your decisions, and then all the technical complexity of rewards. But first, decisions.
So the conversations that I've had in this space have all been US-centric, but you hold a multinational perspective. So even with a single framework, there are always many realities, right? I've thought about compensation typically in a US-centric way, but compensation means different things in Argentina versus Mexico versus the EU versus the US. And that varies dramatically by a number of factors, right? Whether it's legislation or structure or workforce composition. Is a global framework even possible or desirable? What are your thoughts on that?
I think yes, because I think we already mentioned that thing is happening around AI. And that's a really important point because the thing is, when you design or when you define a philosophy for compensation or benefit or whatever, is you have the main titles there. If you want to have an equity-based policies around the globe, or if you want to have differentiation, or if you want to have whatever, something driven by performance, I don't know, performance driven decisions. Well, the point with the AI is that you are very close to be very efficient measuring productivity of each job. And we are really close to that. And from the past, we have certain proxies to understand productivity of each job, but now with AI, we are close to have a really precise method or technology to measure productivity. And that's the whole change. What I mean with that is that we, from years, equity was one of the most important drivers on every compensation philosophy around the world. But now, with that new tools we have in hand, maybe we are moving for a more differentiation model. So that big titles around the world, just huge difference, equity or differentiation is possible to do. And you need to understand what it means if you want to be based on equity or market or differentiation. And differentiation is becoming operational. So that's a very important point. For me, it's bold.
Can you tell me more about the differentiation model?
The differentiation model is, well, for years we have, when we think about productivity, to understand productivity of each job or each person, you go to some clues about that, about generic objectives or academic background or age or whatever. But all those are proxies. You don't know exactly the level of productivity of each job. You have a general idea. You could be more precise, more, I don't know, more a cloud. Let's say more, this proxy could be more precise or more generic, but AI now are giving us tools to measure with in a really precise way. So that's why I think compensation and benefit will be moving from this equity and general approximation to the differentiation model. We will be more precise. And that's why we need to understand our decision architecture previously to implement AI technologies for compensation or rewards. I don't know if I'm clear with that.
I think you are, but I want to reframe this a little bit.
Okay.
I've had a conversation, or it's a real hot topic in the US, at least, US workforce, to talk about a skills first approach. Is that an accepted kind of multinational term, skills first or a skills based
Yes.
approach to employment? So when you talk about differentiation model versus the equity model, is there an implication in that kind of skills based orientation because of the ability to crunch so much data now and to be very precise? Is that where you're going with this?
Yeah. Yes.
And I've had conversations with US workforce development organizations and think tanks as well as employers. And what I've heard again and again is the employers don't seem to have the data together yet. Really, I mean, we all talk about a skills-based approach and how important it is, You're talking about the differentiation model and the potential being there in order to crunch these numbers. Is what you're seeing
No,
like are
we are not
no.
there. We are not
Okay.
there yet. We are making some kind of futurology or something like that. But I think is we cannot avoid the AI topic on this. I think no one can really say what is happening with that in the world of work or world of employment. But this is something that will have its huge impact from the organizational design point of view, jobs, people, skills, and is a hot topic. It's a trend, and I think we are in the middle of a hype of opinions and studies around AI. But it's certainly there because I know for sure you use AI for your day-to-day work. I do. You live in San Francisco. I live in Buenos Aires, different realities, but everybody use some kind of AI solution on a day-to-day basis. So there's no way that we can avoid to think about that, to project that, to include AI on our work. I think it's important to think 5 years from now. I think we are not there. Companies don't have the data in place. Companies doesn't have the decision architecture to implement AI now. But I think is the next step. As you mentioned earlier in this conversation, when I started to work in employee experience, we didn't have the tools. We didn't have the tools that we have right now. But anyway, we started to work with that, and companies started to work with that approach, and I think we are in that place at this precise point. I think in 5 years, companies that will become operational. I mean,
A skills-based orientation to hiring and development,
I think
right?
yes. I think it's inevitable.
So the commonality between every conversation about AI that I've had is nobody has the answer as far as what it's going to require from workers, specifically across different job categories. But I know you've been thinking about the meta skills, right? You know, frame a problem, you reframe a problem, you work with AI like it's a colleague, right? What are you seeing as the human capabilities that survive whatever it is that comes next? What's really
Well,
important that
it's really interesting because when I think about that and I talk with colleagues about that, one of the things is when you have a kid coming out from high school and they need to think about what to study and whatever. Sometimes I receive that kind of question: what I have to study, what I have to do, and from my point of view, you need to think about design thinking is my favorite. Design thinking is because it has creativity inside, which is really nice, but it's creativity with rules, creativity with a governance, right? And
yeah.
I think design thinking is one of the things that could be really, really interesting and useful in the following years. That approach, that skill, the idea to iterate all the time, and the reality that you have right now will be changing so fast that you need to adapt, to iterate, and start again. Well, I think this is one of the things. Other thing is language. To create a really good prompt for AI, you need to express yourself well. So I think language could be really interesting to as a skill. And I never heard a company talking about language or grammar or
Right.
that kind of things. Math will be logics. It will be logical thinking. It's really, really important.
What do you see in from your seat in Argentina versus these global companies? I mean, you've worked with dozens and dozens, if not hundreds, of global brands. Uh, when you think about the U.S. workforce that you've seen and how they're prepared versus the Latin American workforce and how they're prepared versus any EU workforces, and bringing all of these things together. Are you seeing a workforce that's been prepared with things like design thinking and communication? We have a huge debate going on in the US, obviously, around preparation of the workforce and higher education. When we step outside of the US-centric perspective, what do you see as being effective and being common in how different nationalities are preparing their workforces?
Well, I think that we are struggling with technology. All I heard is be prepared with technology, with prepared tools. But I don't think that this idea of design thinking or language or whatever is being on discussion. I think the discussion is always around technology, and I think we need to do a step back from technology. Technology is there. We need to understand. We need to understand how to use it, but also we need to understand how what we can give to that world from our part as humans. I think creativity is something that only humans can bring to discussion, and then we'll see. Maybe it's AI or some kind of new technology arise. I don't know, but I don't think that the discussion is there right now. You have some people who is thinking on that from the universities. You have people talking about this kind of the development of that kind of skills. But in general, I think that we have a global compensation always around technology. And I think at the end, technology will do whatever we indicate technology to do. So I think we have some human skills, specific human skills to develop. And I think is in a 10 years framework, I think is the point will be there.
Oscar, in a US-centric perspective, we think about tuition benefits and reskilling and upskilling the workforce. How are you seeing, across the multinational spectrum, how are you seeing different regions approach this upskilling of the workforce, and are they? What are the trends?
The trends is working with the educational system, but the educational system is not at the same place everywhere. In Latin America, we have a great educational system in Argentina, in Brazil, in Mexico, but the criteria are quite different from the US perspective. We have different approaches from the academic framework of these universities, and the same is with Europe. When I think the top universities here in Latin America, maybe is more familiar with Europe universities compared with the US system. I think it's kind of a cultural background that make the difference, and the access that people have in Latin America for higher education. And I think the companies are working together with the universities in order to develop and achieve that kind of connection. In some countries that works really well. Brazil is a really excellent example. In Europe, is terrific work in Spain, France, and UK. But unfortunately, I do not have enough information from Asia. But in Europe and in Latin America, companies, the corporate sector, are more and more involved in the development of that skills, and they use the academic baseline to work in that.
What does that look like? Well, I mean, I have conversations with university presidents here in the U.S., and they talk about this kind of emergent approach with, groups of employers providing feedback on programs and skills that are developed in the programs. What does it look like in Argentina versus the EU, for example?
I think the model that the companies are using here is quite similar from the approach. I mean, when the companies have the job fairs and try to detect the talent in the middle of the degree cycle.
Yeah.
And then the companies started to catch that talent previous to graduation, right? And in forms of tuitions, in forms of job promise, they started with tuition and then they offer a job. But you need to understand that the companies that made that here has a strong focus on the industry that they belong. For example, Petroleum has
Very
their
specific
careers that they're looking for, but it's not the same approach with other areas. The other thing is that in technology, I mean technology as cybersecurity, or they don't have that connection with universities because people develop their technical skills outside the academy. So it's quite complex. I mean, you need to see what a specific industry made on that sense. It's not, you cannot define a generic way to do that approach with universities. That depends if you're working on mining or petroleum or technology or whatever industry has really, let's say, personal approach on that.
So let's say it's an industry that seems to be doing it well in Latin
Yes.
America, whether
Well,
that's petroleum or mining or whoever's doing it well. What does that model look like internationally when an industry or an employer works well with the regional higher education system? How does that relationship work?
I really don't know. No, I know, for example, petroleum very well.
Yeah.
That's the point is that the petroleum companies started to work with the universities and the academy from scratch, maybe from high school. They started to work trying to detect interest of the students on that kind of area of work or that kind of industry. They work really, really hard on awareness, but not only awareness of the company. They work on the awareness of the industry. I mean, petroleum has been doing that kind of job for decades. They have a really good understanding between the academy and the corporate world and the corporate needs from the academy, not only to catch the talent, but also for science development. I think petroleum in the region, I mean, Mexico, Colombia, Ecuador, Argentina, Brazil has a really long story on that relationship, and you can have really good examples on that.
Do they work closely though to develop the very specific skills? I mean, do you know anything about how closely they work with universities and developing the programs? Like, have you
Yes,
heard about that?
absolutely. They participate on the development of the programs.
That's common.
It's really common. That kind of collaboration is really, really common.
So the old workforce categories, whether they're full-time employee or freelancers or hybrid workers, those are dissolving, right? The EU worker classification is one signal, and you're looking at a variety of signals.
Yes.
A gig platform regulation is another. Can total reward strategy span the whole spectrum, or is it already out of date? And like, what do you see happening?
Well, you need to do rewards need to move on that direction because you touch a very sensitive point on that is the worker level in the UK. No, is that people from working for platforms that they already have now they have a legal form for that kind of employment. From compensation point of view, you have the chance and the opportunity to design from compensation, from organizational design, to resolve the kind of issues that kind of work represent. So if the kind of work, the kind of relationship that the people has with the companies change, and change in that level of maturity, compensation need to change. You cannot pay this new kind of work form in the same way that you did 40 years ago, because it cannot be aligned with business purposes, and sometimes it cannot be aligned with what the people look and what the people need from a job. So yes, I think we have a glimpse from the future, looking how rewards are working on that kind of work, because we return from to the beginning of this conversation. AI are opening the opportunity to measure productivity more efficiently. Platform workers, they are being measured their productivity in a really precise way nowadays. I think that's the real change, is the level of precision on what you can measure about productivity, and that changed the compensation rules.
What's just from your perspective? You're super familiar with the Argentinian workforce, with the Brazilian workforce. Like, can you give me a specific example of how maybe a workforce in Latin America, the makeup of the workforce and the roles within the workforce differs fundamentally maybe from how we regard the workforce here in the US?
I think the huge difference between the workforce from Argentina, or I will say Latin America in general, is the level of formalization. Maybe I don't know the statistics in the US, but you can find here easily 30 or 35% of the general workforce, the country workforce, not formalized. So that's a huge change from the generic point of view. I mean, from statistical point of view. But when you
And by not formalized, you mean not full time
no
as a or what do you mean specifically by not
no
formalized?
not covered by the law, not so informal. So in that in that sense, I mean, you have a huge difference, because the formalized, regulated work is around 40% as a maximum. Well, that makes the world of employment, the world of work in Latin America quite different from the US or from Europe, and it's a challenge that we need to address for sure.
And how do you typically find that your design of the employee value proposition and the total rewards program, all of these flexible elements that you design, on behalf of the employer for the local workforce? What do you have to do when the level of formal employment is less than half of the population? Like when you go out to the general population, what do you have to take into account?
One of the things, of one of the attributes from an EVP here, but it's not only in Latin America, I think it's a global trend. One of the most appreciated attributes from an EVP is stability. Stability on the, and stability is very familiar, very close to that non-regulated or regulated jobs. Because if you have a regulated job, you have a certain protection, and this is what people sought after. Really, this is one of the attributes that an EVP should express to be attractive. Not only, but is really important, and we have measures about that. People really appreciate the stability, and I think it's one of the elements that you need to consider as a company to work in. I mean, it's not only Latin America that it is happening. I think everywhere.
Oh, it's happening in the US. It's the topic of daily conversation in any major, newspaper, news channel. I mean, this is the news. This is what everybody is hungering to hear.
Yes, if you as company can, I don't think any company can say you will have stability here, because you never know. There are forms of telling that inside an EVP. So in context, I think this is one of the key points. And stability is, of course, related also with compensation, benefits, and working conditions in general. So yes, if I have to choose one, I choose work around the idea of stability.
Yeah, that makes sense. The tables have really turned just in the last, I think, since just a little bit before the advent of AI and chatbots. I remember up until 22, 23, the topic of conversation on, in the C-suite's mind was, we're talent starved in these areas, and we need to, better prepare and vet people. And, we want to message out how well we're treating people. And now you see all these announcements by leadership saying, I'm making the hard decisions, and we're laying off this part of our workforce, and we're thinking of reducing the number of vacation days that that would have never been part of the conversation. Like, that's kind of a signal that's the antithesis of stability at this place, right?
Exactly.
Is that affecting everybody, or is that more of a US phenomena?
No, I think it's everybody. And I locate that around the pandemic.
Yeah.
I think pandemic was something that we still try to understand what was happening there. Yes, I think it's a global trend. I think that kind of news and that kind of quotes you will find everywhere. Of course, the US is a really important market in that sense. So what is happening in the US will have replication all around the world. But you also see that you have certain CEOs moving forward and then going backwards with 400 layoffs, and well, we did a mistake. We are going back. So you heard that kind of news all the time, and that's why if you have some kind of stability attribute around your business or around your activity, you have to find a way to mention that. It will be really appreciated on the market, and the talent will appreciate that. I think there are a lot of thoughts that you can make around the idea of stability. Stability doesn't mean forever. Stability, I think, is more related with a well-designed experience, no surprises, or at least the fewer amount of surprises possible. So when you have a good design, that is quite possible. Always perfectible, but I think it's possible.
Thoughtful planning, a commitment to the workforce, and constant iteration and optimization, right? I mean, from where you started in 2014 with a lot of this work, it seems to me the technology is finally catching up to this vision, and the concepts of employee personas and journey maps and empathy maps, they all existed. The tools to measure them and keep track of them didn't. And that's part of this conversation, right? Now they do. Do you see global companies willing to applying these design criteria to rewards with the same rigor that they apply it to customer experience?
Yes, definitely. Maybe they are catching up. They're still catching up with the idea, but you have companies doing a great job around that and using technology to. I have clients that are working around those ideas and moving forward and getting results in that sense. So I think the design of an employee experience is not a tool, it's a focus. It's a way to approach people's strategy. And inside this big title of employee experience, you have a lot of tools, and we will have more tools in the near future to do it better. But you need to think first on the design. the decision architecture, what the business need, what kind of talent the business need, your demography, your surrounding, your cultural background is not the same everywhere. What could be great for Brazil could be the worst for other kind of culture, or for the US or other places, or what is good for a company could be not appropriate for other. And that's why I think these market driven decisions are kind of tricky and kind of excuse for time to time. And I think the companies with that kind of approach can do what they really need to do beyond what market or what other company are doing. I think is important. The value of the benchmark, the value of market data is important, but in a context. And I think a strategy can.
Wow. Well, there's a saying, things are tough all over. Have you ever heard that saying?
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Things are tough all over, but it sounds like a lot of the conversations that we've had on the total rewards and EVP are issues that multinational approaches are grappling with each day. And Oscar, I just want to thank you for sharing your perspective. It's a really rich perspective, and I know there are so many folks in our audience who are really going to appreciate it. Thank you for joining us today.
Well, thank you very much. Kind of sorry for my English because it's not my first language, but I did my best.
You did a fantastic job, and I appreciate you, and I look forward to talking with you again sometime.
When you need, whenever. Thank you very much.